bank on it. You can put 100 grand on it. Anything I said, I stamp on it. In a private plane, I lamp on it.
Hi guys, welcome back to my YouTube channel. My name is Matewa Khatsotezi. If you are new here, welcome. I hope you like the content that we put out and you consider subscribing. If you're an old sabby, hi, welcome. We are still around. I miss you guys and I hope that you've been well. So today I have a guest in our video. She's my sister-in-law and her name is, you can introduce yourself.
My name is Olivia Mashiho.
Welcome.
Thank you.
So guys, just so you know, we are doing this for the second time. The last time we recorded this video, we did not have space and it got cut off. So we are here again and I hope that this conversation is going to be as authentic as it was last time and it will flow and it will bless the people that will be listening.
Yep.
Let's take it back. So in this channel, we are talking all things marriage. But I love that before we talk about where you are now, we take it back to Olivia as a child. Olivia as, what were your dreams? Were you looking forward to getting married? Did you have any role model that when you looked up to, they motivated you or inspired you to get married?
I think growing up, I think marriage was always on the cards. It was not, it was a given. You know what I mean? It was one of those things that for me and my sister, it was always, we were definitely were going to get married and we were going to have children, so the whole thing, it was always a thing. But I think also it's largely inspired by the fact that we grew up in a home, with a mom and a dad, quite pretty functional, where the whole thing of family and marriage was normal. So it was not a faraway concept. It was something we saw playing out every day. So you have routines and you kind of grow up with those routines and you look at them and you think, you know what, I don't think that I want to live a life outside of routine like that. It becomes normal. And anything else outside of that becomes something that is unheard of, So I think for me, marriage was always, it was something that if it didn't happen, it would have really impacted me, I think. I think it would have really impacted me. I know that there's a whole generation of people who don't care much for marriage. There's like a whole generation coming up who don't care much for marriage. But I think also because I am largely inspired to live by principle, and I think that the family unit has everything to do with that. I think the family unit has everything to do with it. If we don't have functional families, we will struggle to have functional children. We'll struggle to have functional society. You understand what I'm saying?
A lot of things that we have now stem
from the lack of family. And the fact that there's a fragmentation of the idea of family. So I think for me, because of the fact that also I live by Christian principles, I believe in family. I believe in it as a foundational issue. So I think that's how I saw it. The genesis.
And looking back now, what would be a highlight, one of the things, even if it's just two things that you think you took from your parents' marriage to implement in your marriage?
I think one of the biggest things for my parents was friendship. They really were friends. I think they got each other, they laughed, together. They had their own inside jokes, things that we really couldn't understand. And they really enjoyed spending time with one another. It was one of those things that you saw a very healthy interaction. Typically in our home, like my mom was a teacher. She was a teacher, so now she's retired. She was a teacher, so she would come back. We would come back from school pretty much around the same time she'd come back with us. And then my dad would come back around 4 o'clock, in the evening. And the first thing my dad would do would go looking for my mom. He'd go looking for my mom, like, hi, bye. It's hi, bye. He's going to look for my mom. Maybe he doesn't find her. Where is she? Like, where's your mom? And they would spend probably a good 30 minutes, in their room, spending time. And then they'll come out, pretty happy. you know. And those were the routines that they built into their marriage, you know what I mean, to build their intimacy. Now that I'm older, I actually understand that. Like it was a routine to build intimacy and also foster communication, amongst other things, of course. But I think those were one of the healthiest things that I saw about them: the friendship and the communication with one another. Yeah, so I think for the generation they lived in, they really were head and shoulders above, many.
Do you think the current generation, because we are very fast paced in everything that we do, there's a lot going on. We are trying to be everywhere at the same time. We are trying to be everything to everyone. Do you think are we intentional in terms of building those routines?
I don't think so. I think for whatever reason, I think we think love is gonna make it happen. So it's like, just as long as I love you, the routine, everything else will work itself out. And I think that one of the biggest errors that we make is to think that because I love him, everything else is just gonna fall into its natural place. It doesn't. It's intention. I think the one thing that I noticed about my parents was that they were intentional. My parents would intentionally shop with each other. So on Saturday they would plan it. On Saturday we are going shopping. And then they'd be talking about it the whole week. So we would know that come Saturday, don't even try and ask for nothing. Make your own plans.
So it's what we call our date night.
Yeah, what we would now call our date nights. Exactly. Yeah. For them, it was, building that home with each other, going to the plaza, mostly to buy my mom's stuff. But you know what I mean? It was those things. And also my dad also had a habit of buying my mom red doll. Every 3 months he'd like buy her red door. That's how I learned to appreciate beautiful scents, from that routine that they had with my dad. It was, my mom would never be out of perfume. And red door at that day, on those days, was the equivalent of what I don't know, it would be the equivalent of the biggest brands that you have now. So it was probably what we would pay now, like 2,100 for perfume. It was exactly that back then. And my dad always made sure she had perfume. Sure. But all of that was intentional. You know what I mean? It was not, there was no chance about it. It wasn't like, no, it's going to be by chance. No, they're going to the room after work. It's deliberate. The Saturdays spent together, deliberate. The perfume buying, when the perfume, so he would keep his eye on that perfume. At the moment it's finished, he's buying another one. Those things are intentional. And I think as a generation, we don't have that intentionality. I don't know whether we're chasing other things. I don't know what are we chasing.
I also
don't know. I don't know what we're chasing, guys.
Purpose, purpose is loosely, it's a word that is loosely used nowadays. It's purpose, making money, hustling, and we think all of that will actually make a marriage, and it doesn't.
And it doesn't. Yeah, and it doesn't. I mean, I don't know what we're chasing. So I think for me, the generation I know, we're not chasing that stuff, and what I know for a fact is that the functional human being that I am today has everything to do with that. Yeah. It has everything to do with how intentional my parents were. It has everything to do with how intentional they were about their relationship, the foundation that they laid that built confidence in us to know that there is something as stable as family. You know what I mean? That everything else can move, but the stability of family is this. I think the current generation, we really struggle with that. And I can't even say that my dad, it's because he saw it somewhere, My dad, grew up in a polygamous family.
I was about to say that, there are those that might be listening and thinking that I did not have that as a background. I did not grow up in a household where my mom and dad were there.
Yeah.
I did not have those modeling the behavior that I would want to one day use in my family. But I think it's more of knowing what you want, the kind of family that you want, the culture that you want to build in your family, how you want to raise the children, and teach yourself. It requires, I think marriage requires a lot of unlearning for you to learn new things and
absolutely
exposing yourself. The other day we attended a seminar, Paul and and I think the one thing that I took out from that seminar was how beautiful it was seeing a lot of black couples there. Some might go to say, no, my favorite celebrity is there. But definitely you'll come out of that room and, with something that you might take to your marriage. The intention to go might be different from others. Maybe others are going through stuff. Others wanted to go just to have fun. But for the fact that we were all in that room, and I think it was, if not majority, everyone was black. Wow. And to see 3,000 black couples being there, it shows that people are trying to be intentional. And that even if you don't know how to do that, there is information, there's things like seminars that 100. You attend so that you know that this is how you ought to behave as a wife or as a husband. So a lot of people need to know that you don't have to grow from that kind of an environment for you to build. And I'm sure there are things that probably your parents were doing that you're like, I don't want to take this. Oh, absolutely. 100%. Yes, there are things like, no. I'm like, no, this I don't want, Yeah. So now, tell me about your marriage then. So Olivia gets married. How old were you when you got married? 32, I think. 32. Yeah, I think I was 32, yeah. And for those that don't know, you were actually a virgin when you got married. Yeah. What motivated you to, keep yourself up until marriage? I think it was, I don't even know at what point of my life did I make that decision, to say that I want my first person to be my husband, Yeah. I don't know at what point that decision came, honestly. I think it was, and I know people are going to go over spiritual. No, honestly, I think it was an act of God. I really think it was something that God himself watched over. I mean, we live in a country that is largely marked by a lot of sexual abuse. The fact that I never, got violated, I never was raped, literally was kept, for the purpose of marriage. For me, it's mind blowing. In a country like ours, in a very highly sexualized environment. I think we live in such a sexualized society. You know what I mean? Where it's more possible for you to sleep with someone before you're 16 than it is not to. You know what I mean? So I don't even know. At what point did I make that decision? I think also the story of salvation, the fact that I was saved when I was 10. Yeah. So my salvation came early. I always say that God trapped me. I always say that God literally did me one. He trapped me young and built a consciousness in me about right and wrong, if you want to put it that way, at a very young age. So I knew also, I think also now that I actually think about it, one of the most significant conversations I had was the sex talk with my dad. So my dad had my sex talk with me. One of the scariest conversations I've ever had. I'm like, it's like, you sleep with boys, you're going to fall pregnant. That's how that's how he put it for me. I think I was about 10. I think I was about 10, yeah. And it was like, all I can say to you is that boys just want sex. And if you get together with a boy at your age, there's nothing else that he wants at this stage except sex. Nobody wants to get married at 10, right? Yeah. Nobody wants to get married at 11, right? So, so it was a really tough. To be a mom, yeah. So I was like, if sex is going to have him like this wound up, I don't want it. So I think it was that plus salvation, but I think it was an orchestration of events, by God. Yeah. Literally, I don't want to lie. Because it was not like, aside from the conversation that my dad had with me about the birds and the bees and my salvation, it wasn't like I was surrounded by a lot of voices, who were talking about purity. It was nothing like that, but I think in retrospect, I really wish that we would have more of those conversations. True. With kids. Yeah. Especially when because I started, I went into puberty early. I think I was 11 and a half. So my puberty started very early, so I think that probably around 10 or so, we need to start having those conversations with our kids, to say that if you want to have, an unscarred persona, if you want to not have baggage, if you don't want to have issues on the inside of, the benefits of not doing it are so much more. Yeah. It is so beneficial because you're not dealing with old people's issues at a very young age.
So I think for me, it was decision, but it was backed up by my faith and also by a very strong father figure, who was willing to have that conversation with me and share with me the consequences of if it does happen, what does that mean for me? You know what I mean? So I guarded it with my life. It was, I guarded it with my life. Like it was one of those things that if I'm dating someone, the first thing you're gonna know, I don't do sex. Like it's out of the question. I'm not gonna do it.
So you quick to leave the relationship? I mean, did you even date?
Yeah, I did. I did.
Dated,
I did. I dated Sipo, I think in high school. Then there was Mondley. Yeah, I think those were the two. Yeah, and both of them very clear about it. Like, oh yeah, and Tabisa as well. Yeah. So I think with all of them, it was very clear that I just don't, so if this thing is gonna work, you must know that that's the route I'm not gonna go. So, and luckily I think probably because these guys were in the faith, they never pushed for it as well. So I was never under pressure. There was never any type of pressure to do it. Yeah. So I think for me, if I could encourage anyone who is facing that, who's facing the choice, should they do it or should they not? I think it's so much better to not. Yeah. It's so much better to not. It really creates a more secure you.
Unpack that for people that wouldn't understand when you're saying to avoid baggage and creating a secure you. What are the benefits of keeping yourself to marriage?
I think for me, one of the biggest benefits was that now that I know, what sexual intimacy is and how it actually translates into like you as a woman, because we I think largely the issue of sex is not just a physical issue for us. You're largely attached to whatever it is or whoever it is that you are with. And I think that the benefit of not having sex before marriage is that you don't attach. It was always very easy for me to detach myself from relationships. It was always very easy for me to walk away, because I was not invested. You understand what I'm saying? I was not invested. I had not lost anything. I had not invested anything that I felt like, oh my God, I'm losing myself, because I think if it was that I had those sexual encounters, for some of us were intense, I think I would have been a psychopath. It would have been really, I would have dysfunctioned, because of the nature of how sexual intimacy makes you cling to whoever it is that you've been intimate with. You understand what I'm saying? And I think the tearing away is like that example that was given by Juanita Bainam, I think, in her book. There's a book that she wrote, I think, Something Sheets. And she talks about how, when you get into a relationship, you leave. It's almost like attaching two pieces of paper together and tearing them apart. I can imagine how that would be, because I think
the other one would be left.
The other one is left on the other one. So you walk around with pieces of people on you, And I think that we live in a society that tries to downplay that.
Yes.
I think that we live in a generation that talks a lot about, no man, we're just kicking it. Why must you be so hectic about it? Why must you be so intense?
Test and drive. You can't get married to someone that you haven't.
Oh no, I think these days that's not even the conversation anymore. These days it's like, why are you so intense? Why are you being so hectic about this? I mean, this thing is nothing hectic. And this is coming from girls now. Where the girls are like, you're being a lot. You're being a bit too much. You're taking this thing when I'm at the taba. It's not that deep. Yeah, like we just kicked it and that's it. We hung out. They call it hanging out now these days. Like literally. Having being intimate with someone is called just kicking it. And I think it's because we've lost all sense of understanding the impact and the effect of things. We live for today. We live for the moment. We live for the now. That what's going to happen tomorrow, I don't care. The truth of the matter is that whatever it is that you do today has a cumulative effect on the person you become tomorrow.
Yeah, sure.
So if it is that I'm going to sleep with someone today and then 2 months from now I'm sleeping with someone different and then 2 months from then I'm sleeping with someone different, all of that stuff is having a large impact not only on me spiritually but also on my emotions, my ability to attach, my ability to commit. Yes, it can also make your heart cold. Because if you need to teach yourself not to attach, what is that?
Exactly.
You know, if you need to teach yourself that I'm going to sleep with this person, but I'm not going to have attachment, then that means that you one day are going to be married and you're not going to have attachment. You're going to one day be married and you're not going to be committed.
Where you need to be.
Exactly. Which is why we largely struggle with commitment now.
Yeah.
You know, because people are in relationships, but they've taught themselves the habit of not attaching. They've taught themselves the habit of it's not that deep. You understand what I'm saying? Now you're in a relationship that is a covenant. You are married now. You've had all these, relationships that were non-committal, all these relationships that were loose, all these relationships that had no depth, so-called, all these relationships that were not that deep and that were not that serious, and all of that. And you've taught your heart that we stay beneath the surface, we stay above the surface. We never do anything deep. How then do you build a covenant? The day that you're now called on to build deep, now that we need to now start talking about love is not enough. What are you gonna find after the butterflies? Because you've taught your heart the butterflies. Some people literally go into relationships and when the butterfly phase is over, they leave.
Yeah.
So how are you gonna last in marriage?
And marriage is not about love.
It's not about love. It's not. I think a lot of people, will listen to us and say, no, they're having tough marriages. That's why they say it's not about love. No,
it's not.
It's not. It's not about love. Marriage is not about love. It's about commitment. It's about staying the course. It's about staying when you don't feel like staying. It's about being there when everything on the inside of you just wants to be on its own.
Yeah.
It's about spending life with someone and coming home to someone and having to make room for them. Even on days when you feel like, you know what, I literally just want to get into bed and sleep when I get home. I don't want to have a conversation with nobody. I don't want to interact. I don't want to talk about my day. Yeah. I don't want to talk about what happened. You know what I mean? But you have to do that. That stuff is stuff that moves beyond what we are teaching ourselves in those relationships where we are sleeping with this one, sleeping with that one, and sleeping with that one. You're teaching yourself habits that are very difficult to unlearn when you're in a marriage. Once you get in marriage, you have to now have to unlearn that the moment I get irritated, I can't leave. You can't leave. Literally, you can't leave because I'm irritated. So he's irritating me. Look, every month he's irritating me because I'm PMSing. I'm irritated with him for like a whole week, but nobody's leaving.
Yeah.
You understand what I'm saying? Your interests, they change in marriage. So today we're kicking it. We have everything in common. Tomorrow, that thing that he liked, the thing that he liked, and the thing that you both like together, one of you is going in that direction still, and the other one is like, I'm no longer want to golf.
Yeah.
I don't want to golf anymore. What happened? No, I just outgrew it.
Yeah.
You understand what I'm saying? So if you're building your marriage on hype, or you're building relationships on hype, when you get into marriage, it's not about hype. It's about being with someone as they evolve, right? And being with someone as they evolve is such a deep issue. It's a spiritual issue.
Yeah.
Because you have to be with someone even when you don't understand them. There are seasons you don't understand. Like, what is going on with you? You understand what I'm saying? You used to spend hours watching this type of show. Now today, whenever I switch it on, you're like, nah, I'm not interested. You understand what I'm saying? So if you're building your relationship on likes and on things, hey, no, we have a lot in common, and you like the color blue, I like the color blue. Tomorrow I might wake up, I don't like the color blue.
Yeah.
You understand what I'm saying? So what I'm trying to say is that I remember our pastor once said, he says, don't trivialize what the devil weaponizes. So don't make trivial what the devil uses as a weapon. That thing that you're doing, that thing that you're doing, that thing of getting into one relationship after another, and you think you're unscathed by it. It is going to be cumulative.
Yeah.
It is going to add up. And one day you will want stability. And unfortunately, you would not have taught yourself how to be in a stable relationship.
Yeah.
You would not have taught yourself how to be in a relationship with one person and be sexually satisfied with that person. Because that's the other thing about marriage, right? It's one person. It's one person. And I know for a lot of people, the whole argument out there is, oh no, how can you sleep with one person and
forever
and it's exciting. It is exciting.
Yeah.
Because if it is that you still are devoted to this person, you still love them, and your love comes from a deep place of, this is the person I want to be with for the rest of my life. As you make that conscious decision, your body makes the decision with you. You understand what I'm saying? I think that this whole narrative that we've been taught, that no, sex with one person is boring, it's such a lie. It is a culturing, and it's a construct of society.
Yeah.
Because we, as a society, like I said before, we're a very highly sexualized society. You know, we're a society that encourages promiscuity. We're a society that when men meet together, they talk about how you can't just have a wife. You need to have something on the side. You understand what I'm saying? We're a society that now, even women are like, why would you sleep with one guy? You understand what I'm saying? We're a highly sexualized society. And because we're highly sexualized, we come up with all these notions that take us nowhere. You know?
Yeah.
So for me, it is not true. It is not true personally for me. You know, I think that if you're devoted to someone and if you love that person, you know, and love not just in love, but love conscious, I choose to love you type of love. You know, I choose.
Yeah.
I'm choosing every day that you are it for me, that you are the beginning and the ending in terms about my sexual desires and expressions. This is the person that I've chosen that I want to sleep with. Whatever you decide with your mind, your body goes with it. Do you understand what I'm saying? The same way that if I make a decision that I want to be a millionaire, and then I start to invest myself in reading, in investing, in making financial decisions that lead me towards being a millionaire, one day I will get there. Why? Because I've told my mind, and therefore the rest of my body is responding to what I've decided. It is the same thing with marriage. You know, so I think for me, the thing about our current society is that we teach ourselves to sleep with more than one person. It erodes our ability to commit. Then when we are committed, there's all these societal narratives that we get fed about how you cannot be devoted, how you cannot be faithful, why it's impossible. All of those things are notions that are nonsensical in my view. You understand what I'm saying? And from a perspective that I believe that the way that we're so driven to do other things, we are driven to self-love. You understand what I'm saying? Hey, I'm gonna love myself. You drive yourself, choose yourself, but you are unable to choose to be faithful.
And marriage is not about choosing yourself.
You understand what I'm trying to say?
The opposite.
Yeah, it's about choosing someone else. It's about choosing to walk in this commitment and in this covenant that you have chosen. Yeah.
But I think also it's important for, I always like to bring in people that have deviated from what we talk about, to say it's always important to come back if you feel that you've already done it and you're not married, because I mean God redeems it at the end of the day. So if you make the decision and you know God will walk with you through the journey, heal you through the journey, so that by the time you get into marriage, you are healed, you are delivered, and you are whole, you know, to become that of which God has called you into that marriage.
No, absolutely. Yeah, 100. And I think maybe just to weigh in on that, when Joseph and I started dating, because Joseph and I dated, we broke up, then we started dating again. When we started dating the second time, you know, Joseph literally, he was the one that said, you know what, it was difficult for me, the whole no sex thing, but I think now the grace has been released for me to do it, you know. And he made a conscious decision, because remember, Joseph was previously married, so for him it was a completely different game to what it was for me. But there was such a grace that for him had been released. You know what I mean? And so I'm talking about somebody who was in sexual, in you know, who had been exposed to, you know, being married. Obviously, that's a sexual relationship. So if he was able to do it, if he was able to decide and say, you know what, from this point onwards, I'm choosing to do things right as well. I'm choosing that we're going to walk into this marriage pure. You can do it. You know, you can do it, but it's obviously an issue of prayer as well. You know, taking the whole thing to God, and devoting it to Him. You know, because I think for me, I think that there's very little that you can do in your strength. You know, but I think if you do give it over to God, it's a daily walk. You know, it's a daily decision, it's a daily rebuke to yourself, you know, and stuff like that. But it's possible.
I want us to talk to, now that you've already spoken about dating your current husband, I know it was nyaka nyaka of dating, but I think there was a lot going on. But I think, telling your story, I think, and we would share that now, but I think it's more of an encouragement of standing on the word of God, regardless of what you see with your naked eye, regardless of how the next person is behaving. You decided to stand on the word of God, on what you knew God had told you. Let's share a bit about that in terms of your journey before you got married to my brother. How did you guys meet? How were you convinced that he was your husband before you got married to him?
I think when we first met, so there were two blocks, when we first met, I think it was 2011. Yeah, I think it was 2011 that we first met. And I think at that time, then we dated for a little bit. I think it was probably like 6 months or something. And then within that 6 months, we then decided to go our separate ways because he was going through a divorce at that time. And I think for me, as a matter of principle, when I found out about the divorce, because I didn't know all along, but when I found out about the divorce, for me, I was kind of like, oh, you're going through a divorce, so you're not actually divorced. I don't want to be a part of that, because I, as a matter of principle, believed that if he is still going through a divorce, there's still a chance for him and his wife. I really believe that.
And you don't want to,
and I didn't want to be the person, exactly. I didn't want to be an influence of whether he does make amends with his wife or not. I didn't want there to be something that can be attached to me. So we then graciously, took our separate paths. And then he did the divorce, went through it, and then much later, then he started dating. Much to my shock, because I think I had believed, based on a conversation that we'd had, that once he gets his divorce, then we'll pick up where we left off, and I think that was difficult. I think that was very hard, because I was like, how, guy, like, what is your problem? What did we agree? But he was like already dating, and at that stage we were working together. So I would see, whoever it is that he was dating at any given time. And that was difficult. But I think what I knew, there's a scripture in the Bible that says, to each person is apportioned faith, a measure of faith. So all of us have our own measure of faith that God has given us, for the journey that we need to walk. And I really, I think if I look back at my entire life, there is no place where I had more faith than that time. That I knew Joseph was my husband.
How did you know that?
It was one of those things that I feel like God revealed it to me. I feel like God was like, Joseph definitely is your husband. And I remember actually when we had been together in the first block before I found out about the divorce issue, we had also prayed at some point. And during that time of prayer, God was like, no, you cannot be with him. And I said, but you're not answering my question. Is he my husband? And God was like, you cannot be with him. I did not understand that until later when I found that he was going through a divorce.
Because sometimes as people, when God gives you that answer prematurely, you run with that answer, not the not now.
Not the not now. So I couldn't understand that. But then later when I learned about the divorce, I was like, oh, okay, this is the reason why. And the funny thing is then, during the time when now the divorce had been finalized and now he started dating all these other, dating others. The conviction of him being my husband and the prayer points that I would get about praying for him, the conviction to pray for him grew more and more. And no matter how hard I tried, it was almost as though there was a chasing down, like, you have to pray about this, so he literally became a prayer point for me, a forced one. So I couldn't, it was like if I was not praying for him, I couldn't rest. And that's how it was. It was that kind of journey where I was constantly praying for him, constantly interceding for him. And God constantly saying to me, you need to stay on this prayer. You need to stay on the prayer. This is what you need to pray for now. This is what you need to pray for now. This is where he is. This is what you need to pray for now. I think, yes, it does assist that I am prophetic. And it's not everybody that's going to be able to hear God the way that I would, because that is just the gift that God has given me, the ability to see in dreams, the ability to see dreams and remember them specifically as they are. So that helped me a lot. I think in the journey with Joseph, that helped me 100s. I know that there are people who say, but there's no such thing as the one. I don't know that, because I think for me, I was shown that this is the guy. I think that he was the perfect will. I think if I did end up with anybody else, it would have been permissible. I think it would have been one of those things that God is like, oh well, that didn't work out, but here you can still marry this guy. But I really honestly believe that Joseph was the perfect will of God for me. It was like I said, the kind of journey where he would, when God says, when the Bible says that you can have a burden, so sometimes you're the burden that you have, like what you have a burden for the homeless. It became a burden like that. You understand what I'm saying? That whenever I would think of him, there would be something that pops into my spirit to pray for. So he became a burden. It became burdensome.
Do you think the devil was at work to keep him away from you?
I think from even way before we met. I think that when I look at how different our journeys were, Joseph literally, I think from high school he went into ministry. Straight from high school I went into education. Yes, I think maybe our paths were supposed to be different because of how we complement each other now. That the places where he's weak I'm strong, where I'm weak he's strong. You understand what I'm saying? So I think that the devil I think it had everything to do with him. I think he wanted, I think that what should have happened during that season is that I should have given up. I should have lost faith, because it was almost as though what was happening in front of me was the opposite of everything God was telling me in the secret place. You understand what I'm saying? So in the secret place, God would say, pray for him. He's conquering this battle. He's winning this. You guys are not that far from being with one another. And then when I look at him, I'm like, but he's with Mang Mang. Like, what are we talking about? Like, what are we talking about? Are you like, what is going on here? You understand what I'm saying? Like, are you for real or you just want to make me unhappy? So you want me to be unhappy and you want him to be happy because he's moving on with his life. Now I can't move on with my life because now I'm busy. I'm standing here and I'm praying for him. And God was like, well, that's how your journeys have been made. That there are certain things that have tripped him up that do not trip you up. You understand what I'm saying? One of the fact that you have stayed a virgin, the fact that it's opposite,
like quite
like opposite. And I remember when we were dating, we used to laugh a lot about how we were like day and night. He was so different from what I was. Like I think in terms of if we were to talk about having done crimes, my rep sheet was clean. You understand what I'm saying? Pretty keen, hey. And I stayed out of trouble, And he was the adventurous one. Joseph is, by the time I met him, he was adventurous. He had done a lot of things. He had gone to a lot of things. He's gone through a lot. And I think because of the life choices, he had seen a lot of other things that I had not seen. You understand what I'm saying? So, but it was truly a season of stretching and of faith, the substance of things hoped for and the evidence of things not seen. So literally when you cannot see, you cannot see it. You understand what I'm saying? But it's a conviction on the inside of me that this guy is going to marry you. And then 2014 my dad passed away. And when my dad passed away, he was one of the first people I called, and he's the one that took me home, because my dad, the way that my dad died, it was crime scenes and all of those things. So he was there during that season, and pretty much after that, I think we then started keeping in touch, a lot more than we did before. And I think then God gradually, built us in. Joseph then joined my church. Because he was looking for a church for a long time. Then he joined my church and I was like, okay, cool. And then then before you knew it, we were dating again. And then he said to me, look, I want to marry you. And he and what he then said to me was that he always knew that he should marry me, but he was not ready for it because he had just come from a marriage. He was not sure whether he was ready to get married again. But he knew that if he were to date me, it would have to be for marriage. It couldn't just be for kicks. So then at that stage there, then he asked, and because I knew, I agreed. I must then say though that I think this is what I'm talking about when I say that sometimes events happen and you make nothing of them when they're happening. It's only later that you'll realize the impact.
Connect the
dots. Yeah, also the impact that they had on you.
Yeah.
Right. When we're talking about the whole sexual, sleeping with this person. Yeah. So much later, now we're married. I had such trust issues. Because I felt that my whole notion that Joseph should never have gotten married, or should never after his divorce we should have then come dating other people. Yeah. It had such an impact on me. It had such an impact on me. It had such an impact on the person that I viewed him to be. Yeah. It took a long time for me to believe him. To believe him if he would promise me something, to believe him if he would, if he would say something. There was always like a boogeyman, behind whatever it is that he
this
say.
one.
Like, my guy, hey, I've seen you, yeah, you married me now. Yeah. But the point of the matter is that at a time when I thought you were going to make a different decision, you made the decision that you made. And it took a long time, and a lot of him, apologizing, a lot of repentance, but also ultimately a lot of work on my heart. Like God literally had to really work on my heart, and bring me to a place where I forgave him for it, because it was Kupi like that I held on for such a long time, because I was like, first of all, you delayed me, because I think there was a lot of resentment about the because I think it was like 2 years that cycle, man. So that whole season. And I think it was difficult because you were exposed to him. You could see him. It's not like, absolutely, he was out of sight, out of mind. He was in my face. In your face. It was in my face. And I remember even one of the girlfriends coming to the workplace, and she'd come, because I usually used to stay at work up until late, because I was single, you don't have time for nothing else. I used to stay, until maybe almost 5, 6 o'clock at work, and Joseph would do the same. And sometimes I'd pass his office and there he'd be sitting with his girlfriend. Those kind of things kind of stuck to your mind. You understand what I'm saying? And you thought, and there was on the inside built such a resentment that by the time he had come to his senses, it was almost like all of that was damage done. You understand what I'm saying? And we had to work through that. I think the first, 3 years of our marriage, we had to literally work through that as a trust issue. Because I just couldn't believe him. I couldn't trust him. I couldn't take him at his word, because his word had proven before that he could not stick to his word. You understand what I'm saying? And that is what I'm talking about when I say that you might be making a decision today and it feels like nothing today. And then later on, it is the very same weapon that the devil is leaving as a weapon for 5 years from now. He's like, no, it's fine. Let her believe what she wants to believe. I guess she's young. Let her believe what she wants to believe. 5 years from now, the very same thing that she's trivializing will become a weapon in my hand, and I will maximize on it. You understand what I'm saying? So it took quite some time for me to work through those trust issues. But I think once we had gotten over it and gotten through it, it has been such a journey with Joseph. It has been such a God journey. It has been such a journey of forgiveness. It has been a journey of seeing the hand of God, and really seeing that God is so deliberate about marriage. He really does care who you marry. He does. God does care. It's not like, for him, that's one of the biggest decisions you can make. So he's not looking aside when you're choosing that guy, and hoping for the best. He's hoping for no. He wants you to be intentional about it. Firstly, ask him when you get into that relationship, is this the person I'm supposed to be with? Before, and then don't also have sex with this person, because then all your objectivity, goes out the window, but also staying the course. It's not everyone who would be able to stay the course the way that I did. That was a very difficult journey. And also I wouldn't expect it of everyone, because sometimes you can be looking in one direction. Our stories are not the same. You can be looking in one direction while God maybe has other options that are available for you. So it's not to say that everybody's story is like my story. Sometimes maybe the person you're looking at maybe has made a personal decision. They don't want you. and then you are staying on to say, no, but God showed me. No, I wouldn't advise that. If it is that you can see after some time that this thing is not working out, go back to God and say, Lord, your son.
Yeah.
Or your Lord, your daughter,
And if it's meant to be, God has His way of bringing it back
exactly,
together. Yeah. So I think you touched on it earlier when you were saying you were dating people. Before dating and marrying your husband, you dated
three guys,
and they were also born again Christians, but they were not your husband, clearly. So I want us to touch on that because there's this misconception that because we are of the same faith, therefore it is a given that we are meant to be. I'm not saying, and people must get me clearly, I'm not saying that people should get married to people that are of a different faith, because I believe that is one of the core that you need to look out for, because it's a struggle. It becomes a struggle. Yes, God changes the heart of man and you are able to come back to Him, but it's a long drive.
Yeah, it's a long
things that you won't be dealing with if you married someone of the same faith.
100%.
But I want us to touch on that. That misconception of people thinking that let's go and get married because he is saved.
I think for me, that is absolutely untrue. I think that I would even go as far as to say, if he is saved, you need to search it out even more. And really ask God, Lord, is this my husband? Is this person made of the right character traits to see me through the journey of life in a marriage? Because the truth of the matter is that marriage is a journey. My husband, always says that it's almost like when you get married, it's like picking a car, right? But the tools of the car must match the car. So the tools that you have in the toolkit must match the car. So if it is that you are driving a car, but the tools in your trunk don't match the car, when the car gets stuck, so let's say you've taken the tools that use the bolts for a Toyota, but you're driving a Renault. When the Renault gets stuck, and you now try to take the whatever, the spanner that is supposed to unhook the tire of the car, it won't work, because that toolkit is not for that car. Do you understand what I'm saying? I think that's the mistake that we often make, to say that it's a toolkit. It serves the same purpose. No, it doesn't. It doesn't. So I can literally, go with brother X. And because brother X in any event had maybe his own personal struggles with certain areas of his life, if the person has certain insecurities, certain childhood traumas, sometimes you are with a person and you can't see who they are until you guys go the mile. You understand what I'm saying? So 2 years, that's why a lot of people in 2 years, 3 years, they'll get a divorce. Yeah. Why? Because now you are beginning to know the person. Now the person who is so confident, you actually realize that they've got a lot of insecurities. You understand what I'm saying? And you're not equipped to deal with those insecurities. You, Nje, as a person, because of how you are made up. You're not able to deal with those insecurities. You're not able to, assist in trying to make that person better. The Bible says that 2 is better than 1. The reason 2 is better than 1 is because 2 is supposed to work better when it's together, but sometimes 2 does not work together because the toolbox and the car are not matching. So it's important that even when dating in the church, because God knows all things. God knows the things that you don't see when that man's hands are up, when he's worshiping God, and genuinely he loves God. Genuinely he's devoted to God. He's committed. But will he make a good husband? Probably not for you. You understand what I'm saying? So it's important for you to go back to God and say, Lord, I see that I like this, I like that, I like that, I like that. Is this the man for me? Is this someone who we can go for the rest of our lives with? And God is true. God is true. It's us who don't want to listen. Yeah, we don't listen. It's us who don't want to listen. God is true. And I can tell you that with all the guys that I dated, the 3 that I dated, God was very clear that this is not your husband. It was very clear. you know, very clear. It was not like vague things. It was clear. So whenever I would search it out and say, Lord, this one, he'd say no. And when I would say this one, no. And sometimes you'd give me reasons, sometimes you wouldn't. Sometimes you would just say no. And I must just leave it as it is. Yeah. And no matter how long I would search it out, why, what do you mean no? It would still stay just a no. Yeah. You know, maybe because I didn't have the capacity for whatever explanation you would give me. You understand what I'm saying? Maybe I just did not have the vocabulary for whatever it is that you want to communicate for various reasons. But the point of the matter is that God is faithful and He's true. So when in the dating pool and when in that relationship, God knows the mental state of whoever that it is that you're with. He knows their childhood traumas. He knows the things that they've struggled with. He knows, you understand what I'm saying? He knows all of those things. Capacity. He knows everything. He knows whether 5 years down the line that person is going to lose a leg. And whether you have the capacity to stay with somebody who has lost a leg. He's the one that knows that. You understand what I'm saying? God is the one that knows that if you guys stay together, you're never going to have children. And He knows whether you or him, one of you, will then cheat as a result of that. You understand what I'm saying? God knows the details. So because the devil is in the details, the devil of marriage is literally in the detail. It's in the ability to be able to stand with someone through thick and thin. Literally. Do you understand what I'm saying? And sometimes there's just things we are not graced for. There are things we just don't have the grace for it. So I think that is the reason why praying about the partner and really searching out God, it doesn't mean that once you've prayed and God has said yes, it's going to be perfect. No. It doesn't mean it's going to be perfect. It just means that you are equipped for whoever it is that God has said yes to. And I think that gives you the staying power. You know, because through thick and thin, you are able to stay because God says, you know, until God says something else, then that's fine. Yeah. But if God said, then it still stands. Then it still stands. Through thick and thin. Yeah. Yeah. So I want us to close, and before we close, maybe the lighter part of it. What are the top 3 things that you love about being married? Because I think the reason I love talking about marriage and celebrating marriage, I truly believe that marriage is a beautiful thing. And I think that there's this notion in the society that marriage is about yes, it's about that, but there's also the beauty that comes with marriage, you know. And it's not only about you know, marriage you know, marriage is about, you know, tolerating and no. So, you know, there are people that are in beautiful marriages, and I think yours is one of them as well. Thank you. And I want us to talk about 3 things that you think you love about your marriage. I think for me, the most important thing, or the thing I love the most, is the fact that Joseph and I are of one mind. You know, it's almost like we are constantly moving in the same direction, you know, but I think that largely because of our faith. Yeah. You know, I think it has everything to do with the fact that we are Christian and we are pursuing God above all, you know. So I think that having commonalities, having something that transcends the both of you, connecting you, is everything. It has been everything for us, you know, that in every season of our lives we are walking in a direction that the other one can understand. Yeah. You understand what I'm saying? So if I'm saying I'm going that way, Joseph can always see that, oh, okay, the reason that you're going that way is because of that. I think for me, that has been a highlight for the marriage that we have. You know, the ability for us to understand where the other person is going at any given time and why. Because we are watching each other as we grow. You know, I'm praying for him. Yeah. He's praying for me. Joseph prays for me. You know, when I'm weak, truly he is strong. When he is weak, truly I am strong. You know, I think our friendship, you know, I think we really have become over time really great friends. Yeah. You know, someone who is my safe space. You know, if I'm having like a day from hell, you know, he's gonna know about it. And we're probably gonna crack a joke in the midst of chaos, you know, with one another, because we've become friends. You know, we've become friends, we've become a place of safety that was intentional, you know, because you need to intentionally create safety in each other, you know, that you don't judge one another. So when he brings something, I'm not like, love, really, you know, you know, it's okay, this is safe, you know. So you can tell me like the most embarrassing thing that you might be embarrassed to tell someone else. I'm here, I'm fine, you know. I'm not gonna judge you for it, and tomorrow I'm not gonna bring it up in a conversation and say, you know. So we've become a place of safety for each other, and that has also helped us to build a friendship with one another. You know, and I think also the fact that we have learned to feed off of each other's strengths. You know, like I think when we met, Joseph was busy with a lot of studying. You know, he'd study a bit of this, leave it, study a bit of that, leave it, you know. But I think there was something about seeing my journey, you know, and how much I enjoy studying. But Joseph also enjoys learning, actually. You know, he's got a great learner talent. But the ability for him to see that and say, you know what, this is something that I'd you know, it looks easy. It doesn't look as difficult as probably, you know, it seemed. And maybe grace was also released because we are in each other's lives. Do you understand what I'm saying? So I think it was just the ability to be able to, and me being able to feed off Joseph's sobriety. Joseph is such a sober person, you know, so sober, level-headed all the time, in and out. It's not, you know, he's level-headed all the time. Like, I don't know how he does that.
And I'm so amazed because you are not.
Yeah, no, I'm not. Like I've got extremes. You understand what I'm saying? Like I've got extremes. Like it's either I'm happy or I'm really angry. You know. So my barometers are extremes. You know, there's no in between and there's no mellowing. You understand about it? But one of the greatest strengths that is for him, the staying unemotional and, you know, unattached to like feelings and stuff like that, it has really helped me to calm down. You know, it really has. It really has. It has helped me to become a better manager. You know, it has helped me to become more gracious with people, you know, to become more patient. That has everything to do with how mellow he is. You know, it has everything to do with how calculating he is. So Joseph calculates every emotion. So he calculates every beat. You know what I mean? There's nothing that's left to chance to run off on its own. You understand what I'm saying? That ability, but also at the same time, the ability that I have to get things done, you know, is something that now he's latched onto. You know, that it's built like a, you know, like a capacity for him to also get things done. So literally it's two worlds that have collided that are so different. That are so different. Like
I love that, you know, because we have this, we always think that being compatible happens before you say I do, but there are a lot of things, shedding off things, and learning things, you know. Like I think compatibility is built over time by being intentional. And maybe I can even say, you know, there is a phase of being equally yoked before you say I do, but God really trains us and our minds and our capacity when we are together, because some of these things you want. That's why the Bible says becoming one. It's not like, you know, you become when you say I do, you are one. You become. It's a journey.
Absolutely.
You know, and I love what you explaining, because it's literally a journey of becoming.
It's a journey. It's a journey of becoming. And I think one of the biggest things we look back on, you know, we always say that in the year 2024, we really became everything that we've ever wanted to be. You know, like we abandoned bad habits, you know, we built new ones. We considered the things that need to change. You know, we considered the things in both ways. And I think, you know, Joseph and I also, I think prior to 2024, we've always believed in therapy. We've always believed that whether you're in a healthy state or not, you need to check in. You know, you need to check in on your marriage, you know, look at what's working, If it's working, it's fine. What's not working, and the trick is to do that even in seasons where everything seems to be going well.
Yes.
You know what I mean? Where everything is going 100, then you guys are like,
miss each other.
yeah, and everything is gelling. The trick is that in those seasons where everything is gelling, for you to take a step back and say, this is working great. This is not working. How do we change that? This is not working, and not wait for it to break down and then to start to fix and run around and try and fix it. You know what I mean? So we always believed in therapy. But I think one of the biggest things that we learned in 2024 was that thing of, when you sit through like a session, maybe you're in church, let's say, for example, and the pastor starts talking about marriage. And then he starts to make a joke, or he starts to talk about something that you're like, yeah, I hope this guy is listening. And you're like, yeah, yeah, they're talking to him. And also sometimes he's like, yeah, they're talking to her. Yeah, she's stubborn. I've been telling her. You understand what I'm saying? What we learned in 2024 is that how your marriage begins to thrive is the day you stop looking at your partner and you start looking at you. It is the day you start looking at you and the demons in you, and conceding that, listen, I need help. Listen, I'm hot-headed. You understand what I'm saying? And considering that, I think for me, one of the biggest things is exactly what you said, that I'm not level-headed. I'm not, but I think for the environment that I'm operating in for work, it's a union. I don't need a level head. If I'm level-headed, they'll deal with me. I would have died a while back, because being level-headed means that I would have been calculating when I should be running. I would be trying to calculate, is this working while I'm dying? So it's necessary. I think for me, it's the one of the things that we did at the beginning of our marriage was we did something called the Strength Finder. It's a psychometric exam, I think, that you do, and it's called the Strength Finder. And in the Strength Finder, they tell you what your strengths are, but they also tell you how your strengths affect others. Right. So for me, all my strengths are in the reds, the oranges. So my stuff is all extreme. Joseph, I think, was somewhere, I think, in your oranges and greens. So his temperament is exactly what I'm not. But I think one of the things that we had to learn in time was how to manage that. Not necessarily get rid of it, because it's necessary for our survival. That is why God made you the way you are. But the trick is to manage it. The trick is to take it and say, okay, I'm hot-headed. How do I manage this so that it works for me instead of against me? When do I switch off? When do I switch off, or when do I tone it down? Yeah. You understand what I'm saying? Then you learn how to tone it down. You learn how to, but you must first be true to yourself. Yeah. So one of the things, like I was saying before I brought in that point, is coming to a place where you can acknowledge that I'm a bad listener. You can acknowledge that I don't do well with apologizing. You can, come to a place where you say, I'm proud. Yeah. I'm pretty proud, so even if I'm wrong, I'm unlikely to admit to the wrongdoing. I'm going to make up for it in other ways. It is good for you to know thyself, but also to call yourself out. Because when you start to learn to call yourself out, that is when your marriage is going to thrive. Because then it doesn't matter what Joseph is doing. Yeah. What matters is, what am I doing? Yeah. How am I making sure that I become the best version of myself? Then if it is that I see things in Joseph that I don't like, I take them to God in prayer. And the beauty of it is that God is so jealous over women. He's so jealous over us. He's jealous over us. There's a scripture in the Bible that where God says to men that he talks about, he has seen how men in private treat the wives of their youth, and then he talks about punishing them. So God actually punishes men for badly treating their wives. Did you know? He says, I will not answer your prayers. Because I have observed. Oh yes, I remember that. I have observed how you treat your wife. And because of that, I have refused to answer your prayers. And when you begin to learn that, then you begin to realize that you can take anything to God in prayer. If you believe that your husband has a temper, you can go to God and say, Lord, he has a temper. And I think that this thing is destructive. You understand what I'm saying? Lord, work on it. Help him to work through it. And I cannot overemphasize, I think, the importance of, number one, learning thyself, watching yourself, but also praying for your partner. I think sometimes we talk too much. Sometimes you want to talk about something you should not be talking about. Sometimes it's not about talking about it. Sometimes it's about literally taking it to the Lord in prayer. Because sometimes, just like you, your partner might not be ready to change that thing. So having a conversation about it is not going to change him. Yeah.
No, I love that, because a lot of times, and I've seen with Mpo as well, because Mpo is totally the opposite of me. And before it was overwhelming. Ne? But God has also turned my heart to appreciate the differences that they actually work for me. You know, and I always said, when we got together, I always thought, no, I'm good at communicating, but not until I met him. Because sometimes if you want to talk about things, I'm like,
do we have to?
I don't think it's necessary. But he wants to talk about every little thing. And he has this thing of always saying, like, randomly, are you happy? Are you still happy in the marriage? You know, and you must answer honestly to say, no, like 1, 2, 3, because he loves to, you know, to serve me based on what I need. And I had to learn that as well. So I remember the other day I was thinking that actually I'm not kind. Compared to this guy, I'm not kind. Like, I'm not a giver compared to this guy because of that. So I agree that God tends to use our partners to also reflect and expose, you know, the toxic traits that we have. So I had to look at a lot of things, and I think that what you're exactly saying, it's a book that I read up, The Power of a Praying Wife. I think it's a 3-in-1. 3-in-1, it's praying wife, mother, and woman. So I read Praying Wife, and that lady was saying, yes, in as much as you go and pray about your husband, but you also need to pray about your heart. Because we react to things that if God had worked on your heart, it wouldn't be an issue. It wouldn't affect you. You know, so before you make it an issue, ask yourself, why is it an issue? Because to the next person, it wouldn't be an issue. You know, so from that time, I would always, you know, reflect on that to say, okay, you know, sometimes I would be so mad, but God be devoted to your husband. And I'm like, this is nonsense. This is nonsense. So I truly believe you can't do marriage without the wisdom of God. No. And the conviction that comes with the Holy Spirit.
100. I think this whole thing of marriage is hard. Marriage is not hard.
Marriage is not hard.
Marriage is not hard, and I'm not just saying that because we this is going to be on YouTube or whatever. Marriage is not hard. I think that the thing about marriage is that marriage requires you to constantly die to self. That is hard. Do you understand what I'm saying? The abandonment of your own desires at the expense of someone else, you know, compromising your comfort for someone else's comfort. Let me give you an example. So yesterday we were planning like a family outing. Joseph wanted to go to a certain mall, and I don't like that mall. And then I suggested we go to another mall. He doesn't like that mall. Now in that moment, we could have entered into an argument, and he could have tried to convince me to go to that other mall. I could have convinced him to go to the other mall. But in the end, we ended up saying, okay, fine, then we're not going to go to either one of those malls. We're then going to go to this place. And in the end, we decided and we went to that place, and we had a great time. Do you understand what I'm saying? But if it was that I wanted to force him. Or he wanted to force me. Then it becomes unpleasant. Now all of a sudden marriage is unpleasant. No, it's not. It is about learning what is worth fighting for. What is not worth fighting for. In certain instances, because of the fact that he's evolving, I'm evolving, I'm going to have to make certain decisions of certain things until such time as he has changed. I think one of the things we need to remember about marriage is that a marriage is made up of human beings. And human beings are constantly growing
and evolving.
Always. So the very same thing that he's doing today, he might outgrow it tomorrow. And he's no longer doing that thing. But the issue is for me when I identify it, am I gonna force and say, yeah, he must change, he must change, he must change, he must change. If that is going to be your attitude in marriage, you're going to have a very unpleasant time. Because things don't change at your time.
No.
Because this person is God's project. You are God's project. So you need to trust the process. Trust that God is working on him just like he's working on you. I get when you say you are God's workmanship. The same way he's God's workmanship. You understand what I'm saying? And the trick is just to take it to God in prayer and say, Lord, this thing, you must root it out. You understand what I'm saying? To stay in prayer and to really trust that God can change the hearts of men. That God can change character traits. God can change bad habits. God can change that thing that annoys you. He can change that thing that this person is addicted to. Do you understand what I'm saying? Anytime. But I think that the problem becomes when I make it my life's mission to change you.
Yeah, and it's draining. It's draining.
And I can't.
Yeah. No, I think for me prayer is number one recipe in marriage.
It is.
I've seen myself praying that God please show him that this friend, because sometimes as women we can see things.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Fast.
Yeah.
This friend is not the one. But if you go to him and fight about this friend, you're actually pushing him to that friend. So I've seen God literally moving people away because I was praying intentionally to say move them.
Absolutely.
You know, so prayer. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you. Guys, thank you. I hope we're not rambling. We had a lot to talk about.
Lots going
and
on.
she talks a lot, so I was listening.
Wow.
I hope you enjoyed this conversation, guys. Let us know in the chats. Let us know what marriage is. What are you hoping? If you're not married, what are you hoping to know about marriage? And if you've covered some of, maybe your curiosity about marriage. And those that are married, what is the highlight of your marriage? Let's celebrate marriages as the Black community. Let's show it off. Let's love each other loudly and celebrate our marriages loudly. On to the next one, guys. I'll see you. Please comment, like this video, subscribe if you haven't subscribed. We'll see you on the next one. Bye.